Okay, I'm live. Oh my gosh, there are some people in the comments. All of my buddies. Hi guys. Pyle, Tiara, Duncan. How are you all? Okay, so I have a very interesting story today that falls. This is going to continue the missing housewife theme that we started last week with Dorothy Forstein. So this was a woman in the early 1960s who disappeared and is still missing to this day. But instead of having a very obvious, so with Dorothy Forstein, it's sort of easy to think it was definitely foul play involved. Possibly her husband. There was some cover up. This story is so different because it may have been staged and we may have like a Gone Girl situation in the works here. So I am going to go over what happens in the case and we will go from there. So I don't really have a good idea about how I want to do these because I've always liked true crime, and I've thought about maybe doing like a TR says, please investigate my death. TR, if anything happens to you, it's good to have a friend like me because I will turn over every stone and I will not rest until I get you justice. Oh, thank you, Pyle. I won't tell your Zoom professor you're on here, but this is educational for you. So I feel like you're getting an added educational service by listening to me talk about this stuff. Oh, hi, Eagle. Nice to see you. Yeah, this is my true crime series that I've talked about doing. But yeah, Anya, this is not a stream on the couch. Instead, we are in my fancy detective's office. So what my end goal is for this is I'm hoping maybe I can do like a podcast or a blog where I talk about this. So these streams are more so just to do real time looking into something the way that I would, going into it with knowing a few things about it but not really doing too much preparation for it. And I may change that in the future just depending on how this goes, but otherwise it's just going to be a lot of me reading newspaper articles and looking at whatever photos I can find about it. Oh, the chat is still really skewed. I wish I could change that. Actually, let me see if I can change that really quickly while I have it up so I can take a look at it here. Let's see. I want to see if this makes it a little easier. No, that doesn't do anything. It's just so squished. I don't know why it's so squished like that. Oh well. I'll fix it later. Okay, so back to the story. So, yes, this happened in Lincoln, Massachusetts. And our lady today is Joan Risch, or Risch. Would someone be able to just verify that pronunciation for me? I've been calling her Joan Risch, but it might be Risch. I will correct myself upon finding out. But so the story is Joan Risch was a housewife, and she had moved to this area in Lincoln, Massachusetts, the April before 1961 with her husband. They had came from New York. They had 2 children, a boy and a girl. The boy was just a baby. The little girl was 4. And one day, on just an ordinary day, she had gone about her day doing her chores, running to the store, the dentist. There had been deliveries made to the house, a dry cleaning delivery, a milkman delivery, and she dropped her 4-year-old daughter off at a neighbor's house, and the little girl came back later to the house and then ran back to the neighbor's house and said that the kitchen was covered with red paint. And so the neighbor came over and saw the situation, and it was a very gory crime scene. It wasn't red paint, it was blood, and there are some crime scene photos here that were They're from the Massachusetts State Police. I actually tried to see if I could find this case on the Massachusetts State Police website, but I couldn't. But you can see, so the crime scene photo, they noticed that it looked like the blood had tried to been wiped up. Let's see if I can, there we go. So you can see the blood has been wiped up. Everything's in disarray, and weirdly enough, the telephone had been pulled off the wall, and there's a telephone in the trash. And it's not pictured, but there was a phone book, and it was open to a section with emergency numbers. And those have been things that have always really been super suspicious about this. It's just a very bizarre looking crime scene. So there was a trail of blood from the kitchen to the back door, and that's where it stops. So this is all they had to go on. There was a fingerprints. There was a half of a bloody fingerprint that was determined not to be Joan's, and their cute little house right here. So her husband was out of town at the time of the disappearance. He was in New York, and upon hearing about it, he came back. There's a newspaper here that is a really, really good. It gives you, I think it's this one. Yeah, so this is a really good newspaper about all of the facts of the day, chronologically what happened. So I'm just going to go ahead and go over there. Tiara says the high chair for the baby, poor family. I know. The crime scene photos are just awful. It's very, very weird, though, why there would be an attempt to clean up blood. And there are weirder things in the case, which we will go over. So this is from the Boston Globe, 1971. So 10 years after her disappearance. So we're just going to go ahead and start with the, let's see. Okay, yeah, let's just go ahead and start from the beginning here. On the afternoon of Tuesday, October 24th, 1961, a young matron named Mrs. Joan Risch vanished inexplicably from the comfortable milieu of her Lincoln home, invoking one of the most intensive hunts of state history. Now, 10 years later, she's still missing. There's no indication whether she's dead or alive, and if the latter, not a clue as to her whereabouts. Interest in the bizarre case has not abated during the intervening years. Telephone calls and letters from persons certain that they saw Miss Risch recently still are received sporadically by local law enforcement. Middlesex District Attorney John J. Droney says this is one case we still get tips on. I'd say we still receive 5 or 10 calls or letters a month. Droney said his investigators check carefully on every such tip, however dubious the source. The case is very much still open, Droney said, and it's one that we want to solve more than any other. He believes Miss Risch is still alive, although he concedes some of his top aides failed to share his view. His theory was that Miss Risch was beaten or hurt by an assailant, and that she is a victim of amnesia. Someone, a neighbor or a friend, maybe has the answer to this riddle, and I'm confident we will find it. Lincoln Police Chief Daniel A. McKenna says the case is still very much open on the books of his department, but offers no theories concerning her fate. The telephone calls from citizens have dwindled to only a few per year. I wish we would get something that would help us solve this, says McGinnis. The victim's husband, Martin D. Risch, is an executive for a paper company, refused to comment on her disappearance. He still lives in the same white Cape Cod-style home on Old Bedford Road from which she vanished. With him are their 2 children, Lillian, 14, and David, 12. Interviewed a few years ago, Risch said he clung to the hope that his wife was alive, suffering from amnesia. That's something that we saw also in the case with Dorothy. Her husband thought she was a victim of amnesia. I'm wondering how common that must have been for that to be their go-to speculation. Miss Risch was 31 at the time of her disappearance, an attractive, somewhat introverted woman whose avocations were reading and bird watching. Police from interviews have reconstructed the events of the day she vanished. Okay, so this is where we break down the chronological events of the day of her disappearance. Her husband left home early in the morning, driving one of the two, I have to scroll all the way, family cars, a Lincoln to Logan International Airport to board a flight for New York. Let me increase this if you guys want to see it. Where he had a business appointment. Miss Rice prepared breakfast for herself and children and later washed the dishes, made the beds, and performed a few household chores. She had a 9:30 dental appointment that day. At 9:20, she took her son across Old Bedford Road and left him with a neighbor, Miss Barbara Barker. She then drove her daughter to the office of the dentist, Dr. Paul Goldstein. He filled a cavity in one of her teeth, and she paid him in cash. On leaving the office, Miss Rice proceeded to Bedford, where she did some shopping. The day before, she had cashed a $40 personal check, spending about $15 for groceries. The payment to the dentist and subsequent shopping left her with less than $10. She returned home shortly after 11, chatted briefly with Miss Barker while picking up her son, and walked across the street to her own home with her two children. About 10 or 15 minutes later, W.F. Colburn of Ayr, a driver for Concord cleaning firm, made a regular call at the Risch home. He reported later that he had spoken with Miss Risch and that nothing seemed amiss. Miss Risch made lunch in the afternoon and then put her son in his upstairs crib for a nap. Early in the afternoon, Miss Barker took her son Douglas across the street to play with Lillian Risch. Less than an hour later, Miss Risch walked her daughter and the Barker child to the latter's home so they could play on a set of swings. Miss Barker did not see Miss Risch at this time. Okay, so this was before 2:15 then. Miss Barker reported that around 2:15, while looking out a window, she saw Miss Risch walking quickly or running from her parked car toward the two-car garage and the house. She passed out of view, and this was the last time Miss Barker saw her. At 3:30, Virginia Keene, 13-year-old daughter of the Reich's next-door neighbors, alighted from a school bus at Route 3A at Old Bedford Road. Virginia walked past the Risch driveway and said there was a car parked in the driveway behind Mrs. Risch's car. A few minutes later, Mrs. Barker walked Lillian back to the Risch yard. The only car in the driveway was Mrs. Risch's. She returned to her home, and at 4:15, Lillian ran into the house and announced, "Mommy is gone, and the kitchen is covered with red paint." Miss Barker hurried to the Risch home, saw blood in the kitchen, and observed that the telephone had been torn from the wall and thrown into a waste bin. She returned to her home and telephoned the Lincoln police. The state police barracks at Concord was alerted about 1 hour later. That night, a bloodhound was used in an attempt to locate Mrs. Risch. The dog crossed the road back and forth to the Barker home where Mrs. Risch had gone 3 times that day, but did not go down the slope of Old Bedford Road to Route 2A, nor into the woods on either side of the road. For several days, the search continued with police, state conservation officers, and airmen from Hansen Air Force Base combing woods, marshes, and streams on foot in the air. Reports from persons claiming to have seen a woman of Mrs. Risch's description began to flow into the police headquarters. 3 people say they saw a woman who might have been the missing woman walked in the area of the Risch home late in the afternoon of the day she disappeared. One woman said, One said a woman had been walking around Route 2A toward Concord about 200 years from the Risch home. Another claimed she was walking along the edge of Route 128 between the Lincoln Road cutoff and an overpass. Third reported seeing a woman walking north on the grass center of Route 128 in Waltham. She appeared to be dazed, and blood was streaming down her legs. If there is anything resembling a clue in the case, it is a bloody thumbprint on the kitchen wall near the ripped-out telephone. Authorities have not been able to identify the print, but hope that someday a man will be picked up whose print matches on the wall. There is no evidence to suggest that Mrs. Risch left home voluntarily. Friends and relatives say she was very happily married and devoted to her husband and 2 children. Only 9 days before her disappearance, Mrs. Risch wrote a letter to one of her former neighbors in Redfield, Connecticut. The Risches moved from that community to Lincoln about 6 months before she vanished, in which she described herself as being very happy. Okay. And the rest of it is background, which, let's see. Okay, they do go into it here. Attractive with short brown hair and blue eyes, Miss Risch was an avid reader. In fact, her reading habits prior to her disappearance stirred some interest during the investigation. Many books she had borrowed from the Lincoln Public Library dealt with the theme of escape. Police, however, were unable to make any connection between her reading taste and disappearance. So, I won't go over all of this This is just about her background. But just very briefly, she was orphaned when her parents died in a house fire under mysterious circumstances, is what other websites have referred to it as. And she was then taken in by her aunt and her uncle. And according to this is a little snapshot of the case, but they say that, I wasn't able to find this article. A Boston Herald article from 1993 said that while Joan was in foster care before she had been taken in by her aunt and her uncle, she was sexually molested by her foster father. And that may have been a motivation for her wanting to leave her life or start over. But that doesn't really make sense in light of the fact that she seemed to be very happy with Martin. She had a great job in New York too. She worked at she was an editorial assistant at a publishing company. So it's a very, very interesting case. And I've actually, when I've read this in the past, there's some articles that refer to her neighbor as having seen her carry something red in her hands and taking something red down the driveway. Let's see if they state, let's see. I'm looking where possibly, okay. I'm not sure if this one talks about, but her neighbor, one of the articles said that her neighbor, let's see if I can see it here, says that she was carrying something red in her hands. And the other article that we just read stating that she had blood dripping down her legs. Another theory I've read is that people thought it was a botched at-home abortion procedure that she had tried on herself and it went wrong, thus the panic of trying to clean up the blood. The book that was open to emergency numbers, that possibly the other sedan behind her car that they talk about was someone that was there to help assist her, and this went wrong. This article talks about the blue or gray sedan that came up, parked behind the driveway, and then left. And this article thinks that that car belonged to the assailant, and the assailant left and actually scratched the car, dented it as they were trying to leave. So I watched this movie called Revolutionary Road with Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet, and it was a while ago since I saw it, but in that movie, same sort of like 1960s couple, I think Kate Winslet tries to do an at-home abortion procedure, and that's how she ends up dying. And I know this has happened. There is this story, I don't know her name, she's really, really famous unsolved murder. But basically, a lot of women would have abortion procedures, they go wrong, and then it was staged as a murder. So I really don't know if that's even a possibility here, but the description of seeing a woman matching her description, walking on the highway with blood dripping down her legs, I think that's not so out of the way to think that's a possibility. So let me scroll up and read some of these comments here. Anya said, problem with state police records is crimes before a certain time haven't been digitized since the state allocated budget can't afford it. Yeah, that's probably going to be a huge deterrent with anyone that wants to look into old cases, which is why I just have like newspapers.com. That's about as close to it as I think I'm going to get, other than being able to hack into a city system and see what they have in the file. Tiara says, husband looks sus. In this case, I don't know if Martin actually, he had anything to do with it, but just because he was in New York at the time and he had to come back and no one saw him, it just seems like my radar isn't going off on Martin at all. I don't see how he would have had anything to do with it. Also, Martin stayed in this house until his death. He never filed to declare Joan deceased. He stayed in this house all his life. He never changed his number because he was very hopeful that Joan would find her way back, or she'd come back, or they'd somehow be reunited. And he died without ever having any resolution on that, or never moved to declare her dead or anything like that. It's big difference with his behavior versus the case we saw last week. How creepy and oddly dismissive Dorothy's husband was of the case. I feel like Martin was just unfortunately out of town. Now, when someone gets attacked out of town, when something happens and there's an alibi like that, I agree. It could seem like a setup, but it just seems really bizarre. So that's where I've gone into this case thinking, okay, in my mind, I kind of personally have always thought maybe it was a botched abortion. Okay, Ika's here with the pronunciation. Ika says the sh makes me think the husband's family are of German descent, which the name would be pronounced. That doesn't that doesn't help me at all. Can you phonetically say, is it Risch? I've been pronouncing it Risch. If that's incorrect, they'll let me know. So let's get to the weird part about this. So they briefly mentioned in that article that Joan she had checked out a bunch of books from the library about murder and about missing persons. And she read about 25 books prior to the summer in October. So you could just say, unfortunately, it makes her look as if she was plotting something or planning something. But you have to say this is very, very odd that she would put this is so heavily like a researched topic for her, and she really loved this theme, and then this happens to her. Her kids were out of the house. She made sure the daughter was dropped off. Now, her son was in the house at the time of whatever would have happened, so that is one thing that I don't really know would make sense. He was supposedly asleep, according to the daughter. But yeah, so this is a weird thing for me, is that her reading history was just so specific as to what occurred. So the background for that, let's see. Serene Gerson, a 40-year-old reporter for a local newspaper, found a clue while browsing through a book about Brigham Young's 27th wife. So Brigham Young was and I looked this up beforehand. I did not just have this knowledge about famous Mormon men, but Brigham Young was a Mormon who had a lot of wives, and one of his wives disappeared. Okay, so on the checkout card for the book was Joan Risch's signature, dated September 16th. Gerson prowled the stacks and found another book Risch had recently taken out called Into Thin Air. It was about another woman who vanished, leaving no trace but blood smears and a towel. A hastily assembled group of volunteers from the town's library committee soon compiled a list of some 25 books Risch had apparently read that summer. Most concerned murders or unexplained disappearances. The whole thing added up to our feeling that she had planned the disappearance and was looking for a way to do it, said Gershwin, now 74 and living near Washington. So this paper I'm currently reading is Boston Globe from 1996. So years after the disappearance, they're just going back on it. Oh, okay. Now here, this is the reference I had not been able to find earlier. Risch had led a life once tragic and rewarding. People close to the case said that she had been sexually assaulted as a child. Newspapers report that her parents had been killed in a suspicious fire in New Jersey when she was 9. But Sabra Morton, a college friend of Joan Risch, who still lives in Lexington, disagreed. She said she'd never seen Risch happier than she was in Lincoln. Okay, so let's see. Okay, that's just more comments about the husband. So yeah, this is a really, really interesting thing that they uncovered. Okay, and here is a more relevant, an older reference to them finding out that she liked stories. Vanished wife books gift tip. All right. Let's see what they have to say about that. Okay. The paint was not blood, not a lot, mostly drops, spots, and smears consistent with a nosebleed or a head wound. It was found all the way from the baby's room to the kitchen. Let's see. There is blood in the finger holes of the telephone dial. There were more spots on the trunk of Mrs. Risch's car. Woods and ponds were searched. The usual reports came in. A woman seen stumbling along a county road, of a woman answering Mrs. Risch's description. Okay, the fingerprints were not hers. Oh, here we go. Okay. Oh, here's some more lists, titles of books that she had checked out. Orphan girl vanishes. A man stages his own disappearance. A woman flees her home to begin a life anew. A man runs away to escape problems. A wife disappears without a trace. A schoolboy vanishes on purpose. 2 books concerned the unhappy history of Mary, Queen of Scots. One was an autobiography of a leading authority concerning murders and disappearances. By telephone from New York yesterday, Risch said his wife was an avid reader of suspense stories, but was unaware that a large portion dealt with disappearances. Droney quoted Risch as saying the only jobs he believed she could hold would be in a bookstore, a library, a publishing firm, or as a waitress. It's just incredibly, this is the weirdest thing about this case that I think makes it so different than a lot of other missing persons, is just that it seems like there is some Gone Girl element to it. Like early, the first case of recorded Gone Girl possibly. I've read in another article that the wound was, let's see if I, likely superficial, so possibly not life-altering. But yeah, it's Anya says, Joan sounds so much like Yukai. Yeah, I know that. And she could have just been someone who was very interested in this particular subject. So it's really, there's no way of saying. It is just so incredibly unusual that the scene so well matches things that she had read about. Ross says books are probably a red herring. I don't know if I can rule them out. What are the chances that a woman that is this fixated on going missing in stories about running away and starting a new life just happened to do it in a way that seemed like she was killed? But then again, there was a massive hunt for her. Her husband's company, he worked for a paper company, they actually let the company use like their own resources to try and help. So I really don't I don't know if even if you were really well read about something, if you would be able to stage your own disappearance and evade detection to the point that she did. Now, I know the highway in which she was seen walking through, which was like 2A at the time, was under construction. There's some speculation that she fell into a hole and has been paved over, and that's why there's no trace of her or anything like that. Duncan says, too well read? Yes, apparently being too well read will make you a suspect if there's something suspicious afoot. Yeah. Just super, super pretty though. Let's see. Ross says these are the book titles. No, they weren't the book titles. They were the topic of the stories. So, and Joan was also an orphan as well. So, yeah. There is a movie called The Hours with Nicole Kidman. I forget the other women in it. But this very, very unhappy housewife in the movie sets out and contemplates suicide because she doesn't even have a bad home life. She's just depressed. And stories like that were, I'm sure, incredibly, incredibly common because especially for Joan, she had a good job in New York. Maybe she felt a little disillusioned with how her life had came out. I don't know. People hide their depression well as well. In a time in the 1960s when it was probably not a thing to talk about, we don't really know her state of mind. But I still kind of am leaning towards a botched abortion procedure. And I wish there was a way that none of the articles talk about it. None. This is extra stuff that I've also read about from other people. So, okay, this website references what I was trying to find in the article. She appeared to be carrying something red in one hand around 2:15 when the neighbor saw her. She had her arms outstretched towards her car. It's just, so clearly the attack had happened around 2:15. A neighbor saw the other car, the gray or blue sedan, around 3:20. That's an hour of time in between her being seen by her neighbor with her bloody-handed. Let me see if I can find that source. That way I can... Oh, okay, that's perfect. A Boston Record American. Let me see if I can find that newspaper here. I also found this little blurb from the Boston Globe. This is, from 2013, where they just talk about it again as not having been solved. Let's see, what was that newspaper called? Boston Record American. Let me see if I can find that and pull it up. And the actual date of it was November 12th, 1961. Oh no, they don't. I don't think they have it. That stinks. Okay, well, I don't see that neighbor here. Or that neighbor, sorry, that paper here. So I don't know exactly that. I wish I could get that specific reference because that's what I wanted to read as her neighbor's. I wanted to read the actual testimony of her carrying something red in her hand. But if we can go off of this, that would mean that there was about an hour from her first being seen to the car being seen. And then her daughter comes home around, I believe, 4 o'clock. Let's see. Yeah, so I don't know. It's a very, very interesting case. Does anyone have any ideas that don't fit mine? I don't think she staged her murder. I think it's very, very peculiar that she was very obsessed with true crime, but not even true crime, specifically disappearances. I don't see it though. I'm still leaning towards like something happened at the home, something involving the second car. It didn't seem like, I've seen crime scene photos where there's been a struggle or something and it just looks like, okay, so this has been knocked over. Yeah. The telephone hook, like the telephone receiver in the garbage. It just doesn't seem, plus they tried to clean it. Why try to clean it up in such a haphazard way as well? They say that the fingerprint wasn't hers, but I don't really, it's the 1960s. I don't trust them to be that accurate with their fingerprinting methods. Let's see here. Tiara says that Mary Queen of Scots spoke as suspect. Was she publicly executed in a Tudor power play? Yeah, I don't know if there is some hidden mysterious lineage to her, Tiara. Gabrielle says, did we discuss the botched abortion theory? Yes, we did. Actually, Gabrielle, that is what I'm still leaning towards, even after reading more things today. I still think it was something regarding some at-home procedure, which would explain the other car and which would explain the other person, whoever was there, not coming forward with it. Tiara says, how could she just leave her 2 kids behind and her son in the house by himself? These kids were young enough to need high chairs. Yeah, that is something that Martin was quoted as, let's see. Oh, haven't even gone over this one yet. I think this was just something that they threw out there. They thought, so pretty mother disappears, kidnapped by sex fiend. And I think this is something that they were trying to link to another attack. Let's see. Okay. Let me try and get to where they reference it. Oh, so they don't even talk about it. This is just clickbait of the 1960s. They don't really say anything else about it. Okay, got it. There's just the clickbait article. There is no sex fiend mentioned in this. Okay. Okay, but this does actually mention the Martin Risch quote that I was trying to find. She would fight like a tiger if the children were threatened, said the grieved husband who was given company promotion 7 months ago. A state policeman said Mrs. Risch might have fought her assailant and then went willingly with him to protect that child upstairs. Yeah, it just doesn't look like, I don't have enough background with looking at crime scenes, but from crime scene photos I've seen, it doesn't look like this is a struggle. It just, like, something happened. Maybe they contemplated opening up they were looking for help, decided against it. Maybe it was going to ruin Martin's life. And so, but why wouldn't Joan take her car? That's another thing too. They say that the bloody trail goes from the kitchen to the trunk, but that the rest of the time she was just on foot. So I'm not really sure. Brian says, is that green screen behind you? Yes, that is. I figured I'd do like a little detective office thing to kind of match the theme. Duncan says Meryl Streep and Julianne Moore. Oh, yes, thank you for the hours. Yes. So in the hours, Julianne Moore is the 1950s, 1960s housewife who's very disenchanted with her life and wants to run away. Let's see. Bishop said it could have been a plan that went wrong. Yeah, that's what it seems like. It seems that whoever was here to help her, the other sedan that's seen as pulling up around 3 o'clock. But even in that story, so her neighbor says she saw her around 2:15 carrying something red in one hand, which I've always assumed was blood or something else, something that she wanted to dispose of. And then another car shows up at 3:20, which is an hour later, which I guess the other car, and this is like, this would have happened in the middle of the day. She's got neighbors and no one would have seen her leave or being dragged into someone's car. Like, it happened in broad daylight. She made sure her other daughter was out of the house too, which just makes me think it was some weird at-home procedure. Ika said, but was she? Maybe she read so much that you can infer anything by picking and choosing from the list. Yeah, I guess. You're talking about the themes that she was reading from the books? Yeah, it could just be completely, I'm kind of the opinion, I think it's just a coincidence that she liked these ideas. But then you read what was the article that referenced, there was a book, here's the title of a book called Into Thin Air. It was about another woman who vanished, leaving no trace but blood smears and a towel, which is, I mean, exactly, literally this scene. I'd be interested in reading that book too. So if she did want to disappear, I don't think, if someone wants to disappear, I don't think it would be very easy to find them, especially in a time where things weren't monitored. There wasn't CCTV cameras everywhere. Gabriel says, I'm partial to the abortion theory, sadly. I am as well. I think it matches up with the description of her being seen, with a woman being seen that matched her description with, here it is, blood streaming down her legs. She appeared to be dazed, walking north on the grass center. But it's so hard to know with these cold cases, like what really happened. Obviously, I'm not going to make any sort of decision. I'm just live streaming me talking about them and reading about them. Bishop said maybe involving another man who got violent. Whoa, so she had another guy come over, hang out with her. They got cozy and he got violent with her. I mean, that would, let's say something like that happened. Let's say she sends her little girl out of the house. Her son, though, is 2 years old. He's still in the house. You'd think that would be a super dangerous move, but let's say it was an intruder or someone that she knew, because I haven't seen anything about signs of forced entry. And there was a struggle, or there was a fight or escalation of violence, and maybe she went for the phone and said, because what was the article that said there was bloody fingers there? Oh, here you go. There was blood in the finger holes of the dial. So someone, either the assailant or Miss Risch, was trying to call for help, and then the phone receiver got ripped out. So maybe she was saying, I'm going to call for help. Her assailant ripped the phone out and said, you're not going to be able to do that anymore. Maybe it was he didn't mean to hit her or something, and that's why he... No, but that wouldn't make sense. Why would you look up emergency numbers if you just ripped the phone out of the wall? It's just, yeah. Gabriel says there was beer in the trash too, right? Oh, was there? I mean, that looks like a bottle of alcohol, but it's so hard to say what would have been What would have been in the trash can prior to the phone being there? Like, I really don't know. Yeah. It's hard. Unless, have you read a report? It seems like you know a little bit more about this, Gabrielle, than a lot of people. Duncan says some people would surprise you regarding how they behave towards their children. Yeah, that's true. And keep in mind, this is the 1960s. Poor Joan had a very, very unfortunate life growing up, and may have just not wanted this for herself. So I didn't go over this, but she met Martin, let's see, on a blind date at a Harvard football game in the fall of 1953. Let's see. Okay, so in 1955, they were married. So a couple years later, and if her daughter was 4, that would mean they had her relatively quickly after they got married. Yeah. I don't know. I definitely don't at all suspect the husband in this case. I don't think the husband had anything to do with it. But I'm kind of leaning more towards there was an accident rather than an assailant, because, or she could have been seeing someone in private, but just the fact that the neighbors didn't see anything suspicious when there's multiple reports of the neighbors having seen her that day, it doesn't seem like she was trying to be sneaky or hide anything. And the fact that her little boy was in the house at the time, I'm just going to use my detective hat and rule out any sort of affair or anything. I think it would have been super sloppy of her to do it that way. I don't know. Bishop said he could have been there to help with the abortion. That's what I think. I think the other car that they reference, the other sedan that pulls up around 3, was someone who was there to help with whatever was happening. Another thing, too, is, I wish I could. Where's the article that talks about it? Is it this one? Let's see. Okay. An address book was found nearby, was open to the emergency numbers section, but no numbers had been written down. Oh, and here's another perspective. We didn't see these photos, and the other ones are so small. This is the full size. It's really difficult to see, but this gives you a more, so that gives you a more clear view of the blood smears. And just the blood stains itself, obviously I'm not a forensics person. I don't know, like, it's so odd the way that it's just kind of low centralized, and why try and clean, if you're going to clean it up and you wanted to hide something, you do it, but this is so sloppy. Which makes me think it was intentional, or there was a huge rush and something happened. It's very weird. I'm trying to find an article that talked about, I read it, sorry, but they said that no emergency numbers had been called, even though it was open to that section in the book, but no numbers had ever been called. Another thing too is, so according to the papers, the sedan had pulled out of, let's see. Here's more speculation about the blood pattern. State Lieutenant Detective George Harnos, chief investigator on the case, said the blood smears on the kitchen wall indicated that the young mother was possibly struck, fell against the wall, and slipped to the floor. He said that other blood smears on the nearby back door threshold indicated that she possibly tried to grab that for leverage, trying to get her to her feet. Harnos said that the telephone book was on a table open to the page listing emergency numbers. He said he was trying to determine whether Miss Risch had gone to the store and was possibly followed home by the assailant. Mrs. Barker, the neighbor that Lillian was staying with, her daughter, said that at 2:15 yesterday afternoon she saw Mrs. Risch dressed in a trench coat at her car in the driveway in the latter's home. She could have been getting a tool out. If we do go with the botched abortion theory, she might have possibly taken something out of her car, and that's why she was out in the driveway, brought it back into the house, put it in her trench coat, covered it, went back to the house. Also, I don't know why you would do this in the kitchen unless you needed more room. But like I said, this has happened before. There was a very, very famous unsolved murder about a woman who was the victim of a botched abortion procedure, and they staged it to look like a murder because they didn't want to get in trouble for assisting with it. And I think that would happen a lot. So still kind of where I'm leaning towards. Gabrielle says, it was illegal back then, so the idea is that if something went wrong, she drank some beer because it was thought to increase iron levels in blood. Oh, okay, perhaps she tried calling for help, but he said no because he didn't want to get in trouble. I watched a couple of videos on the case, and I think I read that there's something about being empty beer there. Okay. Tara says, I know her childhood was terrible, but seemed like she had a nice life, college education, job, 2 kids, husband who obviously loved her, no financial worries. Yeah, it's so hard to say because there isn't a lot said. Now, see, this was different because Dorothy Forstein was very, very, a lot of articles said how many friends she had and she's very sociable. There isn't a lot about Joan's character other than her one friend saying she seemed to be happy. There's just not a lot there. Her husband saying, she would have fought like a tiger to defend her kids. There's not a lot outside of that to attest to her. I feel like her reading list is way more informative about the kind of person that she was. Like maybe possibly hiding something, a different side of herself. I don't know. It's really interesting. Gabriel said I'm seeing articles saying there was a beer, but not a reference to something from that time that said that. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if there being a beer in the trash can would mean anything more. What is this? Maybe I just open this page up. Yeah, but let's see. What else did I put down here? Oh, Joan reading murder stories. Yeah, this is just such an interesting part of the case. So this is from 1963. Her reading included a book on a woman fleeing her home to begin life anew. Or she could have said to a friend, hey, this is my plan. Help me look like something happened. There's just no possible way. And this is why we're so lucky to live in a time of forensic advancement to where we can do things like test blood to see, was that Joan's blood or was it a mixture? Was the fingerprint hers? Was it someone else's? And just without being able to know anything, this is all we have to go on. This particular set of circumstances. And here's another reference to amnesia. Yeah, I thought, okay, this is the first article I did. I just think it's interesting how amnesia was mentioned in this case along with the Dorothy Forstein case. This is something I've been meaning to look into. How often were people victims of amnesia that just appeared later on? Something may have been going on with these housewives. I don't know. Tiara said, oh, no, that's an old comment. Okay, I think I'm all caught up on the comments. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Unfortunately, there is not a lot more that you can look into it beyond most of the articles already say the same sort of thing. Just going, yeah. Oh, here is an article about her. Here, this is an article all about Joan. Oh yeah, this is the whole, look at this. See, I just have to say that I haven't seen it, and then here we go. This is a whole page that is about her. Let's see. Oh, it says, hi, Luna. Luna's like, you're hot on the case. This is it. There's something on here that's going to be a clue. Let's see. Continued from the first page. Let me go back to page 1 really quickly. What was that page? Page 59. I just want to look at this really quick. What? What is this? Lincoln couple did not mix? Excuse me? Okay, this is new because I haven't seen this yet. Just a second. Sorry. Ignore Luna. She's excited about this because this is new for me. I haven't seen this before. And I haven't read this anywhere. So this is interesting. Okay. This is definitely real-time things I'm finding out here. Lincoln couple did not mix. Wife, mother, friendly but not outgoing. Country home, chosen for privacy. Her neighbors in Ridgefield loved her. Okay, it was only natural that when Mrs. Martin Risch wanted a babysitter for her 2 children, she would take the advice of Mrs. William Butler, her neighbor with 3 children, and hire 17-year-old Virginia Hendricks of Brooks Road, Lincoln. Mrs. Risch was always careful and efficient, Virginia, a senior at Lincoln High School, said yesterday. Oh, these are all different articles, aren't they, about her? Martin Donald Risch, a crew-cut young man in his early 30s, had graduated from Carlisle. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's about Martin. It's Connecticut. Those who knew Mrs. Martin Risch, where she lived, loved her and they miss her. She was a good neighbor in their small suburban community and their friends she made before packing up with her husband to move away to Lincoln. Wow, this is like an exciting discovery for me. Okay. Officials have their work cut out in Lincoln. Victim slugged in garden. Fell on car, police think. Oh my gosh, look at this. Is this just like a compilation of different articles about it? Let's see. Before they left for the evening, she would always leave the telephone numbers for police, doctor, and the number where she could be reached in an emergency. They might go out for dinner or to the movies, but they always came back when they said they would. It was usually between 11 o'clock and midnight. Okay, so that's the babysitter. Virginia said that she had been first contacted by Mrs. Risch early in July and had only been to the house about 3 times since. She said that she had to turn Mrs. Risch down twice because she had other plans and had not worked for her for over a month. Both Mr. and Mrs. Risch were very friendly, but Mrs. Risch was more so. She kept a very neat house and the children in bed when I arrived. The rooms gave the appearance of being gradually furnished and some were very bare. It was homey, but there was nothing outstanding about it. Only a short time in a deep-rooted community, Mrs. Risch, with 2 children and her husband, often away on business trips, had little opportunity to join the local clubs, reserved but friendly. She did not appear at the October 5th general membership meeting. Okay, she was not especially glamorous, reported one. Is someone on here? Do you see this? What is this? Or did I just see? Oh, maybe I just clicked something. Sorry. I don't know what that was. She was slightly well-built person, very quiet, unassuming. She seemed quite content. The Risch's next-door neighbor said that he and his wife had not met Joan about 3 months ago. We were sitting in our backyard when she came over to introduce herself. She brought her 2 children, Lillian and David. She was quite reserved but friendly. Neither he or his wife had seen or met Martin Risch. The family backyard barbecue pit was occasionally used, Robin Chode thought, but it was apparently for family and not neighborhood cookouts. 2 houses away said she never met the couple. Even the business acquaintances of Martin said he had never been introduced to his wife or heard him mention her. And in that short time, Risch had been with the company. Risch had been with the company, there had been no... Oh, in the short time that... Okay, blah, 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 blah. No company socials which he might have made a meeting possible. Not having children of the school age, she had no reason to enter the Lincoln Civic Circle. Let's see. Checked with 2 local Catholic churches, St. Joseph in Lincoln and St. Bernard's in Concord, found no one who might have met Mrs. Risch, who was reported to have said she was of faith. Her selection of friends from among her neighbors seems to be limited. Zoom in. Seems to be limited. Where is that? Okay, here we go. I have never met anyone in the past few days who said, "Oh, I know them." We don't have time to socialize with our neighbors anymore, a woman said, who has lived in Lincoln for 25 years. Thus, it is understandable that information on the background of the missing Joan Risch is so scant. Only a few that know Joan, previously Natras Risch, received her Bachelor of Arts degree in English. It was her husband who said that his 5'7", 120-pound wife was usually dressed in a skirt and blouse or sweater around the house. But the aloofness of a suburban community only serves to complicate the mystery. Who, if anyone, could have wished her harm? She had no enemies, her husband said. Very interesting. Let's see. So, she loved the outdoors. Nature delighted her, said Miss Olga Madden, best friend and close neighbor when Joan Risch lived around the corner on Rowland Lane. Oh, this is back in Okay, these are her friends in Connecticut. I miss her terribly. Very interesting comparison with her friends back home in Connecticut to her friends in Massachusetts. So, this attack happened in 1961, October. She and Martin moved to that area in April of 1960, and within all that time, she hadn't made any friends. Interesting. Duncan says, one more outburst like that, Detective Luna, I'll have your badge. Yeah, I should have her badge. No, I think Luna was pointing me to this. Maybe there's something in here. I haven't read anything about her background or her personality, so this has been really actually insightful because most of the other articles were just about the case. Let's see. Joan didn't drive very often. She liked to walk with the children. She was quiet and reserved, very intelligent. Things like her garden, bird watching, and reading good books. Were her way of getting pleasure out of her spare time. She was so reserved that it was difficult to get to know her. I practically accosted her on the street when I first met her. Wow. Interesting. She was innocent and friendly, a really nice person. All of us on Rowland Lane knew her as a neighbor. She was a very happy person. They were a happy family. Yeah, but you have heard that before. Oh, I had a neighbor. Nothing, they were happy. They seemed happy. Everything was great. I'm sure in this time more than ever, people knew how to hide their emotions, so I don't really take that as any sort of affirmation that everything was okay. All right. Miss Risch never discussed her family or personal problems with me, the doctor said, but appeared to be very happy. Okay. I know they were happy. That girl lived on nothing but her home, husband, and children. One of the reasons Joan liked it in Lincoln, Joan wrote, was that she had pine trees around the house, like I have, Miss Heckman said. Interesting. And here's a little bit about Martin. Though we don't suspect Martin, but there may be something here. Let's see. Risch was not anxious to change his company affiliations, but men are always thinking of ways to move ahead in business, and after discussing it with his wife, Joan, he applied to the Fitchburg Company for a job. Let's see. Okay, that's talking about his new... Okay, and here in June of 1960, Risch received word that he was hired, began looking for a suitable place to live, not far from Fitchburg, where his paper company was. Martin Risch emphasized to the agents that he wanted, above all, privacy. The family was falling in line with the keep-to-yourself philosophy, so typical of the many small communities in New England, where the hope in purchasing a home is to gain a certain amount of anonymity and privacy. Sort of home they wanted. The house was set back from the road and surrounded by a screen of evergreens and trees. So Martin just seemed like a weird guy. Martin would be gone from home 3, 4, 5 days at a time, sometimes for a week or more. On the day of his wife's strange disappearance, he was in New York. It was at times lonely for Joan, with the 2 children and her husband away. That Martin was kept busy is attested to by the fact that the lawn needs mowing and the white wooden storm windows are still stacked in the garage. When the husband and wife went out for the evening, a babysitter was hired. But she described Martin as cold and reserved. She said that he wouldn't say hello to you on the street unless he was sure he knew you. At work, Martin shares an office with 2 other men. Neither knew him very well, nor could recall him ever speaking of his wife or children. He was all business. Okay. So this is seeming like Martin 100% would have no idea what was going on in his wife's life. Probably just a detached man, cookie cutter type of the day. Let's see. Okay, that's something else. Oh, okay, so now this is talking about what we think. Authorities think the kidnapper knew of the house's emptiness during the day and might have secreted himself in the garage last week to watch Mrs. Risch. He returned Monday to continue his surveillance. They theorized the man left the garage, stole across the lawn over a shrub bush. He then hid behind the Risch car parked on the drive where Mrs. Risch, who was gardening in the backyard, came upon him. That doesn't fit with other things I've seen. I haven't seen yet an article that said that she was gardening or anything. The man lashed out, police believe, striking her in the face, probably on the nose, stunning her and causing blood to flow. This is not blood from a nosebleed. There's no way. Where is that? Yeah, this is not nosebleed blood. This article seems a little bit far-fetched there. She reeled across the car trunk, leaving it on a blood stain the size of a silver dollar, and onto the right rear fender guard, where more bloodstains were found. If she made any outcry, it was probable that the heavy tree cover nearby muffled her scream. According to new police theory, Mrs. Risch ran into the kitchen through the back door and reached the wall telephone. As she started to dial, accounting for more blood traces on the finger holes, okay, we've read that, her assailant came into the room and pulled the cord from the wall. Okay, that's actually what I mentioned earlier, that in the case of an assailant, that's most likely what would have happened. She was reaching for it. He pulled the cord. So it seems like that's what they're going for. He struck her again and knocked her to the floor. This time she lost consciousness. Police said it would have been easy for the attacker to have wrapped her in a gray charcoal topcoat and carry her through the woods onto Virginia Road. No, because his car would have still been there. Or he could have driven his own car into the Risch driveway and carried her out. Okay, that one would make more sense. The latter would substantiate the story of 14-year-old neighbor Ginny Keene. Is it Ginny or Guinea? I think it's Ginny. Ginny reported seeing an old blue car in the back of Mrs. Risch's in the driveway when she returned home from school at 3:30. Oh, so we don't know when that car showed up. It was just spotted at 3:30. Interesting. It could have gotten there later. Let's see. So goes the latest theory on the new mystery of the Bloody Angle, the name given the area abounding Old Bedford Road in Route 2A, where Continental soldiers commanded by Captain Samuel Wilson killed 8 British troops. Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. It stemmed from a report of a Quincy FBI agent's wife that she saw a bleeding woman wandering in the dazed condition Tuesday along the Route 128 median between Lincoln and Trapello Road. The woman said the person was wearing a charcoal gray coat, but she did not connect her with the missing wife, because early reports said she was wearing a tan trench coat. Investigators determined Friday that only a charcoal gray coat was missing. Ryan said the search would resume today and that dragging operations would be instituted along the reservoir. Oh, okay, to search the water for her body. Wow, interesting. So, this is the most I've actually read about Joan's personality. It seems like she was a pretty social woman back in Connecticut, just didn't, for whatever reason, have the time to make new friends. Oh, here's Honolulu, Hawaii, 1962. Another sex addict thing. Let's see. It was assumed at once Joan Risch was the victim of a sex maniac. In the hours before she disappeared, the housewife did the usual things. She talked with the garbage men, the letter carrier, delivery boys. Oh, okay. Well, apparently she was doing her lawn work. About 2 o'clock, she came out in a trench coat and mowed her lawn. Why wouldn't the neighbors say she mowed her lawn? Why would they say they watch? This seems like, again, this is just another discrepancy with things that you read in one article and you don't know, like, what is actually true. No fingerprints, no footprints, no screams, no physical sign of an intruder. The attempt to wipe up blood. We've never investigated crime, said District Attorney Droney, where a man went into a house, attacked his victim, and then carried her away with him. But Harnaut still holds the sex maniac theory. Perhaps the man was not a chance prowler. Perhaps he plotted his crime, knowing that Risch's job kept him away from home 4 or 5 days at a time. A woman said she heard the Risch garage door opened and closed at odd hours before Joan vanished. Investigators discovered that window in the garage furnished a full view of the house. Did the intruder watch the young woman for at least 2 days? Did he leave the garage and steal across the lawn? Of course, that doesn't explain the presence of the Oldsmobile in the driveway or the menstrual blood. I'm gonna have to look for that on here. Do they... Oops, I spelled it wrong. Is that the only mention of it? That is so random to mention that, but not have anything else. Oh, wait. This article from 1962 actually talks about this. You see, this is why I like doing this, because I just learn new things as I go along here. Okay, let's see. All right. Harnos explained that the blood was consistent with menstruation. All right, let me go back a little bit here so I could see. What is this? Checking into a hotel? This is exciting. Okay. All right. Risch arriving at Boston Airport at 1:12 a.m. was met by 2 state troopers who took him to state police barracks and filled him in on what they knew. He was sure his wife's abductor killed her, for she would have fought like a tiger to defend her children. When Risch was taken to his home, he found his wife's trench coat in the closet, her handbag and money in the room. The only thing missing was an address book in which she jotted down appointments, a gray top coat, and the clothes she wore throughout the day. Risch seemed too stunned to realize that the troopers were making careful note of every word he was saying, eyeing him as a possible suspect. For sometimes as a husband, weary of his wife, hires a killer and arranges an alibi. Yes, that is exactly what we said about the last case. However, this husband insisted that he and the girl he married 5 years before had been happy together. Let's see. His claim of successful marriage was supported by their friends in Lincoln and also by people who had known them in Ridgeville, Connecticut, where they lived most of their married life. Let's see. Okay. On that day, an excited woman telephoned Mrs. George Robichaud. She said she could not reach anyone that she knew at the Risch house and hung up without identifying herself. The amount of blood in the house is not extensive enough for her to have been stabbed or shot, but could have been caused by a wound on her head or face. State police detective appointed to take charge of the case announced that about a pint of blood was in the house and on the drive and on the car. It was type O, Joan's type, and there were short hairs mixed with it on the kitchen floor. Several fingerprints were found. Some of those on the telephone were identified as Risch's. Okay. The neighbors, tradesmen, deliverymen were all fingerprinted in an effort to identify others. As far as it could be determined, Joan Risch's fingerprints had never been taken. Oh, well, that's not really helpful then, is it? If they don't know what her fingerprints were, they can't test them against. Tips rolled in. A Bedford motel owner said a nervous woman registered as Patricia Richardson about 4 p.m. She had neither luggage nor handbag, and she left a $5 bill on the bed when she departed an hour later. Risch could not identify the shaky handwriting on the motel register as his wife's. Seems like they'd want to follow up with that person. I mean, this is like where they lived. I'm shocked they wouldn't. A Cambridge cab driver reported that he picked up a fare. Answering Mrs. Risch's description that afternoon, she seemed confused and repeatedly changed her destination. She paid her $5 tab out of money she pulled from a paper bag. A motorist reported that he saw a woman hitchhiker on 2A not far from the Risch home. The time Joan vanished, another said he saw a woman with swollen, bloody legs. These well-meant tips resulted in a rumor that Mrs. Risch might have staged her disappearance. perhaps while she was mentally disturbed. Her husband dismissed these suggestions. He said that Joan was completely stable and had been hospitalized only twice in her life for the births of her children. Okay. Certainly those who saw her on the day she disappeared, Dr. Paul Goldstein, the Bedford dentist, and Walter Coburn, said she was in good spirits, happy. Several puzzling questions emerged. Why would a rapist, as the abductor appeared to be, stop to wipe up the kitchen floor? Or why would Joan? And why did she stop to don a gray coat before she went, or was carried to his car? And where was that car? Garages and empty buildings within a 6-mile radius of the Risch home were searched, for the police believed that the woman, alive or dead, was nearby. Her abductor had holed up, they theorized, because he dared not drive on the well-traveled highways. Let's see. Those who beat the woodlands found a number of interesting things, as they always do, including a woman's panty girdle with copies of girly magazines within 100 yards of the Risch home. Oh my gosh, that is so creepy. If this was like some prowler stalker situation and she was just observed for a really long period of time, that is so creepy. But as we've seen, this was a very isolated place in the woods, which means most likely there's some. Now I'm seeing why those sex fiend comments made sense. They didn't find a body, although they poked steel rods into every soft patch of ground and pushed aside underbrush. Still holding to his theory that Mrs. Risch was the victim of a sex maniac, Hernos and his men rounded up and questioned all the known sex offenders in the area. Then the state chemist announced that the blood they were examining might have come from a wound. They were sending blood samples to Harvard Medical School for further examination. Hernos explained that the blood was consistent with menstruation. He imitated that a sudden hemorrhage may have resulted in amnesia. Now gossips whispered miscarriage, even abortion. Maybe she died during an abortion. Maybe she didn't die and went away with a lover. A Lincoln woman told getting a call a week before from a man who wanted to speak to Mrs. Risch. Another told of a man who accosted her on the street and asked where Mrs. Risch was. A third said that Mrs. Risch was away on her house for 2 hours on the day preceding her death. Police couldn't find out where she went. Although investigators had no part in this character assassination, they now wondered, because of a lack of clues, if a crime had been committed. No fingerprints, no footprints, no screams. No physical sign of intruder. Wow. That's so weird. Let's see. Let's see. Certain key persons are not telling all they know. Well, one key person who was talking was 4-year-old Lillian. She said Mommy sent her to the Barkers. Was it possible that Mrs. Risch was getting the child out of the way or trying to alert the neighbors? The child said that she was sent across the road. Mommy also said that she was going out. Later, Lillian remembered that there was a strange man in the house when she left. Oh my gosh. Much of this may have been the child's prattle, or it may have been accurate if delayed observations of a 4-year-old. Officials have never suggested whether have never said whether the suggestion was followed. Oh, to get the daughter talking to a psychiatrist. That is so creepy. If there was a guy in the house and she was sent away because of that. I've been neglecting the comments. Let me look back here. This is a while ago, so apologies for the delay. Duncan says, yes, super happy until something happened that made the newspapers. Oh, regarding the happy family. Yeah, that's what we hear constantly. Oh, I didn't know there was anything wrong with her. She seemed happy. She seemed fine. So I kind of throw out those comments when I read them too. Gabriel says, these cases prove to us that we should always assume people are depressed and killers. Well, Especially if they don't seem like it or if they do. Yeah, I think just stories like this show you that your facade that you're presenting publicly is not indicative of what's actually going on in your life. And those character testimonies are really just not a good way to set a situation or rule out, oh, there's no way she would have done this. There's no way. Because we just really just do not know. Tiara says, good thing they explain men's motivation in business for us. Yeah, to always get ahead. That's never changed. Gabriel said, I read an article that suggested the blue car might have been a salesman because Joan was known to let them come in. It was said that she had 2 magazine subscriptions because she couldn't say no. Gaudon says, did the cab driver remember the destination she kept changing between? Yeah, they don't talk about that, do they? They kind of just go over that. A cab driver reported he picked up a fare answering Mrs. Risch. She seemed confused, repeatedly changed her destination. Yeah, why not follow up on some of these? I feel like the cab driver, the motel owner, these could have been possible leads in the area. It's just, yeah. Policeman holds phone that was torn from kitchen wall. Martin Risch. Oh, this is the neighbor, Barbara Barker, who checked red paint. Wow. Okay. Someone began telephoning the Risch home regularly, but when Risch, Lillian's grandfather, answered, the caller hung up. Now a new and more complete blood report was issued. Its contents were not made public. Mrs. Risch is still listed as a missing person. There was no conclusion that she is the victim of a sex attack or she is dead. She could be wandering around. And there's some background about her. The only theory the husband would accept was that Joan was abducted and very likely slain. Interviewed relatives, school officials, friends. They found no hint of emotional difficulty, no hint of domestic trouble either. 5 weeks after Joan vanished, a potted plant was left on the Risch's doorstep by an unidentified donor. The police consider this significant because, according to neighbors, someone left geranium plants for Mrs. Risch shortly before her disappearance. Ooh, that's creepy. That kind of gave me chills. He telephoned one of her foster brothers. Okay, so let's see. Why, I was fingerprinted when we were in grammar school. Maybe Joan was too. Joyce, let's see who is. Lieutenant Joyce begged the New Rochelle school authorities to search for prints on Joan and found them in old files. These fingerprints were taken to the Massachusetts State Laboratory with unidentified prints. It has definitely been established that someone other than Miss Risch was in the house that day. The prints in the kitchen were not hers. It may take us months and months to get anywhere with this new information. We have alerted the FBI to check its records. Something may come up from there. She was probably the victim of an intruder, which is what her husband said all along. Wow. In all that time, no money has been drawn into her name from the Risch's joint checking account. It's probably the most mysterious disappearance in all of Middlesex County. Wow. This is it's so weird. It's so incredibly bizarre. But that's why this case is always really stuck out to me, because of how weird it is. Wow. Let's see if there's anything else I can find. I love finding out new things because these are just all new things I haven't ever read about or heard. Let's see. I'm just glancing to see if I see any new stories. Oh, this is referencing her reading list again. Wow. Yeah, I'm probably not going to find anything else. I say that now, but something may come up. Okay, this is just about books again. Yeah. I don't know, guys. I think it's kind of like the end of the road for it. The rest of these are just pretty much articles I've already clicked on, or yeah. Well, that's probably where this is going to conclude. You know, obviously not solved or anything like that, but just some new insight into what happened. It would be so... fanciful thinking is Joan wasn't killed, wasn't attacked, that it was either something that she staged, it was a botched abortion procedure and she went to go get help and she got it and she didn't die, but just really sad. So she would have been 81. And I've heard stories about how people, family members of missing victims, will say that it's so much worse. The not knowing is so much worse than actually finding out what happened. They just want that closure. And stories like this, you just don't know. But seeing the crime scene and everything is just really super troubling to think if she actually was attacked. Poor woman. Yeah. Tiara says, this is what reading gets you. Case closed. Yes, Tiara. Perfect send-off. Thanks so much, guys, for watching. And I will most likely try and do something with all of these stories. Maybe put them into official podcast or something and clean them up and see if I can present new things. But yeah, this was fun. So I will see you next week if there are any interesting stories. I really like missing person stories more than I love unsolved mysteries and creepy things like that, but missing person stories I feel like are really, really interesting and a good way to just keep the memory of these poor people alive or give it some attention. There's some additional information out there. Who knows? A lot of things come to light years later down the road. Someone remembers seeing something or someone was told something. So I think it's just a good way to keep circulating stories of people that haven't been found so that they can have some closure. So it's probably going to continue to be disappearances. So if there are any that you want me to take a look at, just shoot me a message in the Discord server. Let me know. And thanks everyone for joining. That was